Hi, my name is Matthew Bellisario. Welcome to another edition of the Bellisario Sonic YouTube channel. Today, my fifth episode of Pivotal Artists, Pivotal Albums. Thank you for joining me. Again, I welcome your comments. I love to hear your thoughts on why or why not this particular artist that I'm talking about on these videos were important to you. And I really like hearing your feedback. And I'm kind of doing these as a little bit of different type of video compared to the popular greatest of all time videos, which I've done a couple of those. But I started thinking, and I'm like, it's more really what these are our favorites, and why are they our favorites? And I think that's more interesting than just making a list and saying this guy is such a virtuoso, or this guitar player can play up and down the neck like something we've ever seen. But as you know, we know as lovers of music, or if we're musicians, that we're more interested in the songs and how they connect with us, not somebody playing scales up and down a guitar fretboard. And you can be the greatest, most knowledgeable, most technical player that's ever lived, and if you don't have a song, you have nothing. And so I think that's what kind of this series is about. It's about pivotal artists and the albums that affected me at certain points in my life, and how they took me down different directions musically as a lover of music and as a musician. And today, this guy took me down the road to jazz, and that's Louis Armstrong plays W.C. Handy. This particular album is the first jazz record I ever bought. I bought it on CD. This was a huge pivotal album on my journey getting into jazz. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about two other albums that Louis did that were very important to me. So let's kick off and talk a little bit about this particular album and why it's important. Maybe why it could be important to you as well, because, well, it's a historically significant album. It's very accessible if you're not into jazz or don't know much about jazz. And the reason in that is because these are the songs of W.C. Handy, the great father of the blues. And so those people that have been listening to rock music for most of their lives and haven't got into jazz, this album can really pull you in because it has at its root the blues, the 12-bar blues. W.C. Handy, born in 1873, dies in 1958, but he is one of the first to ever publish blues music. And this happens, he publishes his first song in 1912 called Memphis Blues. Now, this guy had a great memory. 1902, he travels through Mississippi Delta and starts transcribing all of these blues songs and starts writing his own music. 1909, he moves to Memphis, where he becomes very popular. And there in Memphis, you have these politicians who are paying these bands to go around and campaign for them with these songs. And so the first song that became popular was Edward Crump, which was I think it was a mayor, guy running for mayor in the 1909 election in Memphis. It was called his name. Edward Crump, or Mr. Crump, I think was what he called it. But just a few years later, it would turn into Memphis Blues and would become his first published song in 1912. Now, there's not a bad song on this record. St. Louis Blues is another one of the great songs on here by W.C. Handy, including Loveless Love and Hagar's Blues, Long Gone, Beale Street Blues. There's not a bad song on this record. St. Louis Blues, however, is a very important song. And I would say that it's got to be one of the most covered songs in the history of recorded music, because this was published in 1914. It's a 12-bar blues with a 16-bar bridge on it. And Handy was famous for kind of modifying the 12-bar blues with his different length bridges. But 12-bar blues become very popular. It would be covered if you go to Google and type in St. Louis Blues covers. You'll be scrolling through a list a mile long of instrumental versions and vocal versions. And this has a great vocal version on here. Of course, Velma Middleton is the female vocalist that sings along with Armstrong on this. This record came out in 1954, although Handy obviously had been, had been popular way before that. He dies in 1958. This was recorded in 1954 and was produced by the great George Avakian, who was one of the movers and shakers in the music business as a producer and artist manager, and started with Decca Records. He was in Columbia, Warner Brothers, RCA, so a huge force in the music industry. And that this was produced by him, George Avakian. But getting back to St. Louis Blues, it was covered by everybody. Instrumental versions by Fats Waller, Art Tatum, Earl Hines, Mary Lou Williams, Sidney Bechet, Erskine Hawkins, Oscar Peterson, even guys like Chet Atkins, Errol Garner, Dave Brubeck, Dizzy Gillespie, Clark Terry, and the list goes on and on a mile long. Also, it's a favorite of vocalists: Kay Starr, Pearl Bailey, Joe Turner, Ella Fitzgerald, Helen Humes, Etta James, all the way up to modern times like Hugh Laurie. If you remember House, watching that show, he's totally into New Orleans jazz and did a cover of St. Louis Blues. That just shows you how W.C. Handy permeates into the recording industry. And what makes this so accessible is it's based in the blues. So people, again, that are familiar with rock music, who you couldn't throw an Ornette Coleman record at them, they probably kind of scare them off. You can show them this great gem of an album. Louis Armstrong Plays W.C. Handy. This is not the only album, however, that would become influential for me and pivotal for me. There'd be two other ones: Louis Armstrong and his Hot 5 and his Hot 7s. And if you want to learn anything about jazz, these are two critical albums. Like Dizzy Gillespie said, who's a famous bebopper, said he would never have come up with what he came up with if it wasn't for Louis Armstrong. So these were recorded between 1925 1928, the Hot 5s and the Hot 7s. You've got great players on them like Kid Ory, Johnny Dodds, Lil Hardin, who becomes Lil Armstrong, piano player, plays on these. These are a lot of fun to listen to. You hear the roots of jazz improvisation right here on record, and they're very important and critical because of that. But they're also really important to me because, again, got me listening to jazz, got me into it, and got me into the idea of really what improvisation's about, because Louis Armstrong was a master of it and really brought it to another level as he went on. So you've got here recordings from the 20s all the way, and then you've got the Plays W.C. Handy, which is a 1954 record. So these were both key for me in bringing me into Charlie Parker, into Dizzy Gillespie, into Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and countless others, all the way up the tree of jazz and all of its branches going out to all these different places. So for those of you out there that aren't very familiar with jazz, these are good records to start with. Hot 7s, Hot 5s, and Louis Armstrong Plays W.C. Handy. You can see it's just one of my favorite records, and I've got several copies of it, like 4 copies, including a reissue of it. So that's how much I really enjoy, like listening. That's how much I like listening to it, and how fun it is. It always puts me in a good mood when I put this record on. So it's one of those records that if you're feeling kind of down or you can put this on and I'll be smiling by the time side one's over. So that's all I got today for this episode. Please hit the like button if you like these videos, and please leave your comments and let me know what you think about Louis Armstrong. Was he important for you? And I've got a lot of these coming up. There are going to be a lot of different genres and different, as they come to me and they come up in my, as I listen to records or something hits me of like, wow, that was a really important record, then I go ahead and do a video on it. So while it's fresh in my mind. So we'll talk to you later on. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode.